Okay, so the former NRL 360 host Paul Kent has launched his podcast. Now, obviously, it's been about, well, I say 9 months since he was formally suspended from Fox League and the Daily Telegraph, and ultimately he would obviously get sacked um, as a journalist from those positions. And that was before his trial date, where he was last year found guilty of a fray. And his downfall over the last couple of years was very noticeable. It was very public. There was obviously the domestic violence charges and the trial he faced there. So a lot of his dirty laundry was aired in public, and that incident leads to what happened last year, where Treegate, as we shall call it, the altercation in the inner west of Sydney outside a pub. And he's been very public about that in recent interviews, where he states, the first incident and his suspension and his first court case ultimately leads to the second one. And it was a very noticeable downward spiral, and alcohol had a big part to play with it. And it's going to be interesting to see how his new podcast does, because sports podcasts, it's a very crowded space, and rugby league podcasts especially is a very crowded competitive space. Now, I follow a few of rugby league podcasts related to the NRL. The Buy Around by James Graham is my favourite, and Paul Kent has actually been a guest on that podcast a couple of years ago. That's my favourite rugby league podcast. And as I say, Paul Kent is now entering a very competitive media segment. And look, he hasn't worked in the media now for the best part of 9 months. He's been out in the wilderness, and he still divides opinion. It's going to be very interesting to see how successful this new venture is, and whether the Australian or the worldwide rugby league fan base and the public have forgiven him, because it's going to be interesting. He does divide opinion. There are people who just don't like him, and you're going to get that in when you're a major media figure. You're going to get that as a very controversial journalist. And as I say, I don't agree with it. I mean, I don't dislike Paul Kent, but I don't agree with everything he says. I do think NRL 360 is not the same program without him. I think it actually lacks a bit. I don't watch 360 as much as I used to, and it is a noticeable absence that he's not there. There are a lot of people saying, Fox League should sign him back up again. But there's another reason why he got sacked. Other networks were also going through scandal at the time, so Channel 7, Channel 9, and they were very public scandals, and there was a lot of internal investigations. So Fox League, well, they would have wanted to have kept him. Ultimately, high levels of management at Fox were like, no, we've got to make a statement here, make a stand. But as I say, he was found guilty of a fray. Both trials, there was a lot of media, scrutiny, and because obviously they're on the public record, all his dirty laundry was aired in public. Now, he was found not guilty at the first trial of assault. The second trial, he was found guilty of a fray. So he's got a 2-year good behaviour discharge. So he's got to behave himself. As I also state, it's going to be very interesting to see how this new podcast does, and if it's going to be a success. So I'm willing to give it a watch. His first episode is up on YouTube, so I'm willing to see how that first episode goes, and if it's any good. I'm open-ended to this one. At the same time, there will be people who think he should not have a career in the media, and there'll be those who support him. And as I say, it's going to be interesting to see how he does and how long he sticks at this podcast game, because he is entering a very competitive environment, a very competitive segment of the media. It's a new segment of the media. Podcasting is a very competitive industry, should I say? And he's had time. He could have done a podcast a lot sooner, before all his legal issues, and he could have been very successful. So we'll see how he does. But he's entering a very cutthroat competitive market. There's a lot of podcasts out there to do with sport. There's a lot, especially to do with rugby league, but sport in general. And with what's happened in the last couple of years, will he be able, A, to attract listeners and viewers to his podcast, and B, who's going to be brave enough to be a guest? Who's going to be willing to sign up and appear as a guest on his podcast? And be interviewed by him, considering a lot of bridges were burned when he was sacked by Fox and the Daily Telegraph. So it's going to be interesting to see how it does. But there we go. Paul Kent has launched his new podcast. So let's see how it does, and let's see what the public response is, because there's going to be those who think he shouldn't do this, and his career's done, and he shouldn't have a career again, and he should pay for. He's got his reputation, and there's those who believe in his he should have rehabilitation, he should be allowed to resume working, and all this, and he'll have his defenders and fans, and he'll have his critics. So it'll be interesting to see A, how good the quality of the product is, and B, can he make a success of it. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. People have been watching my Paul Kent videos lately about the last couple of years and all the scandal he's had in his private life. As I say, will that impact how his podcast does? But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on it in the comment section below. From me for now, it is goodbye, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.